Welcome to Rates and Barrels. This is Eno Saris. It's very strange for me. This is presented by Topps. Be sure to check out Topps Project 70. Thanks for sponsoring the podcast, Topps. And thank you to our guest today, Paul Sporer, my longtime homeboy. We first hung out, I think, at Arizona Fall League. And we were the idiots in the back of the room who got in there late and tweeted everything that Ron Chandler was saying.
Late, we were cracking jokes and we were tweeting too much because like they didn't mind if you share some, but we were kind of giving the game away there. So we got a not so direct message when Ron was like, "Okay, just so everyone knows, if you're tweeting out stuff, let's not make sure it's the word for word of what's going on here." And it was definitely directed at us.
Yeah,
but we learned. We've learned, and now we're on panels. There, we went from being part of the audience to now being on panels at Fall League. And I bet we'll have Fall League this year, hopefully.
And that's what I'm saying, dude. I think that is maybe, I've been trying to I went to the park last night to cover a game, and I've been covered in some games, but there has not been a return to normal moment in covering games or like going to baseball parks. We might get there this weekend, a lot more 100%, park openings for fans at least. But in terms of like covering a game, you're still not really allowed to interact with the players the same way. For me, I think going to Arizona Fall League might be my sort of return to normal. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's something that I look forward to every year. I no longer tweet out everything everyone says.
Same.
But it was really cool. One of the things I did tweet out was they have a few scouts that will come there and talk. And one of them said, that Freddie Freeman, looks terrible. Has the wrong body, his swing is terrible, and yet he can hit. And so his point was sort of about how, we get value from places that we don't always expect it, and it doesn't always look exactly the way that you wanted. So, I think about that sometimes with reference to like Brandon Phillips. I used to hate Brandon Phillips types, no walks, maybe good contact, good athlete, but, not a great sort of, I always gravitated towards these people like Frank Thomas and David Wright and Chipper Jones that had like the 400 OBP, walked at least 10, 12% of the time. But, Brandon Phillips gave people a lot of fantasy value for a long time. Have you had a personal thing like that? I know this is off the rundown already.
No,
it's the rundown.
I have the exact same weakness, and it's still there to where I probably put too much emphasis on walks. They're great. They're helpful. I always talk about how they're good at kind of helping prevent major slumps too. If you're still getting on base, you can still deliver fantasy value by taking your walks, scoring some of those ancillary runs, because everyone's going to have a cold streak. But if you could still give some measure of fantasy value, I think the walk, and then if it's a speedster who walks, then he can even steal a few bases when he's hitting 180 for 3 weeks, which is, again, going to happen to virtually everybody. So it's definitely something that I still kind of combat at times where I'm like, hey, just because somebody doesn't walk doesn't mean they're inherently a bad player. I think the best example of that right now is Adolis Garcia and how much I've been, ready to write him off. Now, I will say I am still concerned about the fact that he strikes out as much as he does, and I would probably put him down for like a 100 to a 110 OPS plus, WRC plus the rest of the way. That can still be super useful. But he walks 5% of the time, strikes out 30%. That's a profile for me that is nerve-wracking for sure. Tim Anderson was a guy I was missing on for years because he didn't walk. I did make the change on him finally and said, listen, this guy's just a really good player.
But is it going to age completely?
That's
great?
The thing. It will age terribly. That profile
so.
Does age poorly. And we saw it a bit last year with Javier Baez. Now, he didn't have his video, and he's gotten better this year, but he is still a sub 300 OBP this year. He's a 294. Like, he's back on track to having fantasy value, but like, that's scary when you're sub 300 OBP.
I feel like in some year, the hot streak that Javi Baez got to get back into our good graces, won't come.
Yeah, exactly.
Like and it'll be, and we'll all be like clamoring. We'll be like, "Wow, Javi, he does this every year." And then that'll be the year that he's 32 and he gets hurt at the wrong time, and it doesn't come back the way it does. So
I totally agree with that. That's the thing too, as maybe we're just thinking too forward about how those profiles won't age. So maybe we should trust him a little bit more in the younger player who can just athleticism his way through it. And then once they hit late 20s, early 30s, then we can start to back off instead of dismissing them day one, like you and I tend to do sometimes on those profiles.
Yeah, it's interesting too that the deeper the league is, the more you can take a shot on these guys anyway. Because like in AL Labor, I ended up with Akil Baddoo and Adolis Garcia, and the way that I ended up with them was with some aggressive FAB bids. So I think I bid like 11 on Akil Baddoo and like 8 or 9 on Adolis Garcia, just like it's the minute they were up. And I was like, these guys could play. And in AL only, that allows you to take a shot on someone just because they can play.
They'll playing play. Time. Playing time drives everything in deep leagues like that. I kind of like that sometimes. You know, we talk about, I think sometimes there's this perception that deeper leagues are harder. In some ways, they're easier because if you have a pulse, you matter. Whereas in like a 10-team league, you look at the waiver wire, you see 50 guys that you like, that you would love to kill for.
And really, you should almost like scream. You know,
exactly. Like you can't play everybody. And, you know, a guy who's kind of struggling, but he's like a medium good level player, he needs to be cut for the hot hand. So you can make a case that sometimes the shallower leagues, they can be tougher in their own right. And the bottom line is that leagues present their own challenges depending on what their format is. And deeper leagues are not inherently harder or better, and shallow leagues are not inherently worse just because there's more talent to go around. They ask you to do different things. And so I like that about having a mix of
I think I have the hardest time actually with shallower leagues where I'm like, I can't drop this proven performer just because he's heading to San Francisco for a week and this other guy is in Colorado. You know, and a lot of times you should do that. Yeah, a lot of times you probably should, because maybe you could get the proven performer back after the week in San Francisco, right? Because you should really just have a more fluid roster. But this year I heard you guys talking on the Sleeper and the Bust, you and Justin Mason, which is I'm biased, but it's a great podcast.
As is this one, 2 of the best out there, I'd say.
I heard you guys talk about how like it's setting in right now that we're not, that it's not last year. That's it's like we've got 4 more months. And you know how it's really setting in for me when I look at my FAB remaining.
And did you realize that maybe you were bidding as if it were last year a little bit? I have a couple leagues like that too, where I'm like, now I need to stretch this out. And if it's in the NFBC league, there's no $0 bids. I know one of Labor or Tout has no zeros, and the other does allow. I think Labor has no 0.
Yeah.
Tout does allow you to do zeros, but if you're running out now, it's like, well, how are you going to manage that?
Yeah. And but I'm of 2 minds. Like, one thing about you could say about FAB is like, if you hold the hammer for the trade deadline, I actually kind of don't like that, because I feel that first of all, 5 months of the season are gone.
Yep.
So you held the hammer.
4 months. 4 months. You have August and September.
Yeah, right. You 4 months of the season are gone. You held the hammer, but you only get 1/3 of the season. If you, for example, got Adolis Garcia with the hammer, but that's not a great example. But if you got how about the first round of call-ups? So let's say Kelenic. Let's pretend that Kelenic is killing it. Yeah, and that you used your hammer early to get Jared Kelenic, and he's just killing it. Then you would have 6 months of that, right? Or
Kelenic and Manoah. So you spent like just a big chunk on both.
I think Manoah's going to kill it all year.
I do too.
But I blew it out on Shane McClanahan, who I think is also going to kill it all year. But let's say I'd say that's a better move if it works out, because you get the full season than waiting for a trade deadline or like a September call up or something, later. There are these patterns to the season where there's 2 weeks into the season, someone gets called up, and then June, the next one is we're right in the middle of it in the next week or so. If Wander Franco doesn't get called up in the next week or so, he won't get called up till September, I think. There's kind of a cadence
unless a need opens up. But the trouble with him was they had 3 guys in the minors. Wall's already up, Brujan absolutely killing it, and then there's Franco, who's doing well, but he's not ahead of Brujan right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it is interesting to talk about that depth chart, because you've got, I think, the weaknesses at center, and then maybe at second. And so if you push Brandon Lau, you could push Brandon Lau into like the first base group, right?
True.
With Joy first base DH. You could do
or
that.
a little outfield action, maybe once or twice a week. He plays in left field, right field.
Just sort of dial back on the everyday. He's not an everyday guy anyway. They're sort of pretty much done with him against lefties. So you could sort of just move him around a little bit more and just put Vidal at second. But Brujan's also playing in the outfield. And Kiermaier, I think you guys even talked about this a little bit. Kiermaier is just an offensive sinkhole right now.
Big time.
And at some point, the defense is not going to be enough. And I think part of the proof of that is that they've been shopping him forever, and nobody's bought.
They're desperate to try to get rid of him, but he's not doing enough as a one-sided player on defense to really draw interest there. And I think they would love to get rid of him in the offseason. It is interesting if Brujan can play a true center field. That would be huge for them, of course, just for the future, because then you could feasibly set up Walls, Franco, Brujan in second, short, and center, respectively, and that's an insane trio. So the Rays are rich in talent, as they generally have been the last, dang near a decade at this point.
Yeah, because you don't normally turn 27 as a Tampa Bay Ray. Anyway, the point about FAB, though, the larger point, I think, is that I just wanted to kind of get your feeling on like how you try to sort of marry the holding on to the hammer, when to use the hammer. Like how much do you have in your typical? How much FAB do you have in your typical league? I think my average FAB is around 30% left.
And I go around that as well. And like I'm in your frame of mind here of like I'm gonna go for the guys that can really move the needle for me early. Obviously, I'll be wrong sometimes, but I'm going to take those shots because I get the longer time frame with them. Like even Adolis Garcia, somebody maybe I wasn't bought in on originally. Like I said, even if he's a 100 OPS plus the rest of the way, that volume that he's going to deliver, because I do believe his power is pretty legit, and if they let him keep running, he's still going to be very good from here on out as a fantasy producer. So I like to be aggressive early in my main event, which I'm actually doing quite well in. If I can toot the old horn just a little, it's super early. So I know I haven't won a darn thing, but I am 7th overall in the main event. Nice. I still have 622 there, which I'm told from main event veterans is still very good. So I feel great there. I have 301 left in an OC that I'm leading, an online championship. RotoWire online championship. That's out of 1,000. So that's that 30% you're talking about. I guess I'm closer to 30 to 50% range, with that 622 being a high end right there. Because I have 535 in the TGFBI, 500 in the Beat Paul Sporer League, and then 67 in Labor. That's out of 100 where there are no $0 bids though. Right. So we've been a little bit cautious. We lost Manoah. We had Manoah for $24. Same bid, standings. Tiebreaker.
No,
Fred Zinke being 3 spots lower than us got him.
56 in AL Labor.
And I wanted to be aggressive, and I was like, I
thought I was being aggressive with 22, but I was like the third highest.
Yeah. So you'd have been in line with us in the mixed league, $24 out of 100. And I wish I'd have just gone, 24 is my favorite number. I kind of went with that. I wish I'd have gone like obviously 25, 26, we'd have gotten him. So I think I'm doing all right in FAB right now, though, while still being aggressive. I'm not panicked anywhere, even the league where I only have $301, because that's a 12-teamer. And, I don't know if you're in an online championship league, but the 12-teamers are so much different than the 15-teamers in terms of the bidding that $300 from here on out can definitely get you to the finish line because players are so cheap. It's insane. A guy will go for 200 in the 15-teamer, and in some 12-team leagues, he'll be like $32, and it just doesn't. The disconnect is insane. I still haven't quite figured out the cadence of bidding in 12-teamers, but I think the 301 there will be fine. So I'm kind of living in that 50 to 30% range.
This is like my second year playing multiple NFBC teams, so I probably was a little bit over aggressive early on when it came to bidding. I range from, I think I have like 250 left in one league to 500 in my best team is the RotoWire. I've got a RotoWire team that I'm like top third, like I think third maybe or something, and I've got
that's great
$500-600 left, and I feel like
that'll definitely work.
Win that one.
Yeah, that will definitely work. Even the one where you have 250, you're not toasting.
I think that might be the 12-teamer. So, and I've been like,
you'll be fine.
It's okay. I'm spending like $2-3 and getting like streamers with that, and
you get legit players for single-digit bids regularly in the 12 teams. So basically I would go through your history of where you've been bidding there, and you could probably lower the bid substantially the rest of the way and still get to the finish line with your 2.
Yeah, I mean, I have to, because I keep looking at that top number being like, oof. All right, let's remove $5 from all these.
Yeah, exactly. On Sunday I end up like trickling down everything. A few previous years I would raise it. I would bid against myself. I'd be like, I gotta go higher, and then I'd be $40 over the next bid. This year I've been going the other way. I'm like, okay, I had $32 bid here. I'm going to go down $8. And then 3 minutes later, I'll come back in. I'm going to shave off $2 more. And for the most part, that has not burned me. I did not adjust that Manoah bid in labor. I left it at 24 and we tied with Fred Zinke. The tough part too, not only that we lost to a tiebreaker, but to Fred Zinke, one of the best players in the entire industry. And not that there's anybody bad in labor, but to lose to one of the upper echelon players who's now going to get Alek Manoah, that was the biggest
and also
bummer.
Because you're ahead of him in the standings.
Exactly. So now he's going to catch us probably, and he's a great player. That's a trading league, which is his forte. So it's a whole mess. But yeah, I'm not too far from you in terms of fabs. 300 or 30 to 50% left, ranging up as high as 60% in a couple of my leagues.
Yeah, I think there's another thing you could do with fabs that has been saving me money is just identify a lot of players you like, you know, and the deeper your fab is, the deeper your fans, your acquisition list is, the cheaper you can be with the whole list, you know, because you're like,
absolutely.
If I don't get that pitcher, this guy's like, you know, is like vaguely comparative, you know, so. You know, why don't I only bid 11 on that guy and, you know, 9 on this guy or 7 on that guy?
That's a great call.
Yeah. So the deeper my list of the deeper, so when I only have like 2 players I can bid on that fill my need, I'm like, oh man, I got to bid.
That's when you start bidding against yourself. Exactly. And I totally agree with that when you realize that your one guy isn't that special and you're like, here's 4 other guys who could reasonably do the same thing, you start bringing all the bids down. So some of it is just doing the extra elbow grease to dig into the pool and see what's there. Now, sometimes the wire is dry, but other times it's more fruitful than you think. And then you start finding names and you can bring down the bids for everyone. So that's a great call out.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things is when the wire is dry and you have a need and there's only 2 names that fit it, and you don't want to spend on them.
I hate that. And I'm like, I really have to put, and sometimes I just won't. And I've gotten better conviction over that in the last year or two. Of
like zeros or death. Like you can't have
that's the thing too. You still need to get somebody. So what I'll end up doing if I don't love the like 1 or 2 names that would really fill the hole is I will find those scrubs who are just going to play that like I can put $3 or $4 on. Yep. Yeah. And I'll just try to get by with that because I don't want to overspend on some clown that I know is not going to be on this team after so-and-so gets back from injury. Yeah. And so you got to try to balance all that, but that's kind of the fun of fab. And my Sundays are spent, you know, going through all the waiver wires like that. And it's been fun so far though. I'm off to a pretty good start overall.
Do you try to make it a one-day experience, or do you?
I will, if I think of a name just like randomly, like I'm just out for a walk with the dog, I'm on here on my computer, I think of somebody, I'll go into that league, check if they're available and put them on the list to deal with on Sunday so I don't forget any names. But for the most part, it's a one-day thing that kind of starts on Sunday. Yeah, to go in there. Like everyone's a $1 bid that I put the names in during the week. I don't even try to do the bid yet. I'll wait till Saturday night, Sunday morning to start doing all the bids.
I might do like a 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 to sort them.
That makes sense too.
Like an idea,
just in case, because you never know. Like what if life happens and you don't get a chance to actually go and put those bids? At least you have something there. So that's pretty smart. But I usually have a bunch of guys by the time Saturday night, Sunday morning comes. So that way, if something happened, I would at least have 15 guys for $1 and probably get at least one of them. So I like to make sure I get, I'm covered in case life happens, like I said.
Yeah, I get this question sometimes if people ask me, like, you know, don't get mad. I think you're a good analyst, but do you think you're a good player?
I haven't gotten that, but I'm sure a lot of people think that about me. They're like,
and
you're not very good.
Well, one of the things is like, you know, the leagues that I've been playing the longest, I do the best in. Like labor this year, I'm in second right now, battling Ian Kahn.
Who's also a fantastic player, so you have your work cut out for you there.
And Schechter's up there.
Another fantastic player.
but like the last 3 years, I've been like sort of fourth, third, second. Like I've been bubbling towards the top because I'm outplayed it for 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
And so like I understand how it works. I understand how bidding works. I don't make as many big bidding mistakes as I used to and stuff like that. I'm only like 2 or 3 years into NFBC, so yeah, I'm like I might win like a RotoWire, you know, league. I like, if you look at my TGFBI numbers, you know, I know that's a minefield right now internally in the industry. But I don't think my ranking is very good in TGFBI. But you know, like it takes me some time to sort of learn a format. And the things I've been playing the longest are like Super Deep and Dynasty.
No, I'm with you, and you've been in Devil's Rejects forever too. But like, I'm with you on the learning of a format. In fact, when I first got into NFBC, my friend who brought me in, Dusty Wagner, told me like there's a couple year learning curve, which I took him at his word, and I didn't disbelieve him, but I probably didn't give it as much credence as I should have. Like, it is going to take you a while.
I am not like, I haven't dropped down money for like anything big yet. Like,
yeah, in those first few years,
most I was spending is like 300, 400, 500 on a yearly budget for NFBC in these first 2 years.
Yeah, and I was getting clobbered, and you're right, it does take a while. And so, you know, the last couple of years, like for a while, we split our main event, so I was still a big sum, half of 1,700, but then started going out on my own, and I'm starting to see better results, and hopefully this is a good year for me. But it's not easy, and I think there is something to be said for kind of like learning the format and everything. I'm with you. My TGFBI numbers don't check out as like great, and I understand that people can use that to kind of judge us, but like, I think the advice and everything that I give, the writing and podcasting that I do, is sound in terms of what I'm doing to come up with these points and takes on players that I have. So I do think there can, just because you can maybe not have the most success in a fantasy league doesn't mean that you're not a good analyst, and vice versa. I don't know that some of the best players in fantasy would necessarily be good analysts. And then there's the people who can do both, and good on those people who dominate their leagues, dominate DFS, and they're able to give good analysis. But it's not easy. And I think I
wonder if those people also write a bunch of columns, because there's just something about like putting my lists out for everyone to see, you know.
I'm in a beat Paul Sporer league. You don't think they're using my list?
Oh my God. I drafted some league on NFBC where like José Urquidy went in like the 5th or 6th round, like 2 picks before me. And I'm like, I know what just happened.
Yep. No, you know. And again, I'm not trying, when I say like they're using my list, I'm not saying that that's all they're using, but they look at my lists to know that
they can snipe you.
Like a guy.
If I like a guy, that I got to get him before, you know, in this turn right here.
Like Tommy Edmond. You had it with Urquidy, who, by the way, listen, you're better than me. You're more important than me. But Urquidy being solely an Eno guy has rubbed me the wrong way. I'm on the Urquidy love too. Now, I'm not trying to take him from you. This is not a you thing. This is everyone giving you Urquidy. I'm like, I've been there from day one too. I want in on this rise of Urquidy. And everyone's like, oh, he's an Eno guy. I'm like, oh, really? Just an Eno guy? That's actually,
I think, a flaw in the industry is this idea. I think it actually bubbles up all the way from prospecting, where, you know, there aren't that many people that go negative on prospects.
Yeah.
And like, you know, like this whole like Corey Kluber thing, where, you know, there aren't that many people that go negative on any player. And so what it creates is this industry incentive to go hard positive on a certain player
to get your guy, plant your flag.
Yeah. And so I was like, JT Brubaker and José Urquidy are my guy. I didn't mean to. I was just like, you know, I consistently rank them higher than most people, and I talk about them, and they fit into my system, my approach, and you know, but it is this idea that we like take stake in certain players and we get wins for them. But you know, if we don't do that, this can be a very unforgiving industry. Like we get constantly bombarded with feedback about our misses.
Yes, exactly. So if you don't have those wins out there of players that you do like that do hit, then you could just be taking, quote unquote, taking L's all day.
All day, yeah.
You don't want that either. So I totally understand it. And by the way, I've never been like, stole Urquidy from me. It's more like, because if you don't think that some of my Urquidy love was born of reading you, then I would be foolish to suggest otherwise.
No, but I thought about it a little bit with Brubaker, because Sungwon Kim, who's a great friend of ours, he's written at Fangraphs, and he's coming to the States to study in New York.
He's great.
And he was working with a team in Korea for a little bit last year. He said something like, here's a guy that I want to JT Brubaker is a guy that I'm going to put, put my stake in. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's why I agree. I had him really high too. And then I was like, wait, did I just do the thing?
Yeah, and it's like, you don't.
No, you can't have Brubaker. I have Brubaker.
Too. It's like people can't, that you don't own a guy either, and like, well, nobody else can write about him or talk about him. Yeah. That's my guy. So we're gonna have overlap, and anytime that you're on a pitcher that I like, I feel that's a reinforcement of my beliefs, because you and I share a lot of the same thoughts on players and analyzing, and of course you have the stuff plus command plus stuff that if it's backing up somebody that I already liked, I'm like, well, now I know I'm in the right. Like, I don't know. I kind of use it as like, okay, I'm on the right track here. Yeah. If is really in love with a pitcher that I like too. If you're completely against the play, or if I'm completely against you, I have to question myself. And the guy that I realized that, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I realized when you were aggressively on this guy, I was like, did I mess up on Ketel Marte? And early on, he's only played 19 games, but early on, I absolutely did. And I was worried, I'm sure you've explained it, but
the injuries are part of it, though, aren't they?
The injuries are
pretty injured.
I can't pretend that that's why I was off of him. No. I was concerned that the 20 power, even though 20 was such a small season, I was concerned that the 20 power output was too reminiscent of 18. And it made 19 look more flukish. So I was concerned that his power, even if it was only 45 games, I was like, oh man, what if his power doesn't come back? And he doesn't run. He has the speed.
Yeah, he doesn't.
But whether it's his choice or Arizona's or a mix of both, he does not run. So my concern was, yeah, you're going to get a good batting average, but what kind of power? And the steals are going to be a little sprinkling of like 8 steals. So I was worried. And then the power's back from like day one. He looks great. The health is the only issue. But I knew I was in trouble when you were like, he was one of your big guys. Like, you were big on Ketel Marte. I remember one of the pods you guys were talking about, like, oh, I'm getting Marte in every draft. Did you end up getting him in most of your drafts?
Yeah. I mean, all of my NFBC teams have Marte and Altuve.
Yeah,
as the second baseman.
I like
and a couple of them have both. So
that's huge.
But what's interesting to me is that both of those, on at least one level, were kind of just projection plays for me. Where I almost just like plugged them into the auction calculator and was like, look, they're just by projections, they're the second and third or in some cases first best second baseman in the pool, and everyone's doing Hura and Albies.
Yep.
And I'm like, I can wait a round or 2 or 3 and get Marte and Altuve.
Hero is one I didn't fall for, but Albies, you've been on Albies you got me on Albies, and I always say like I'm just the bullhorn for Eno's Albies love, because I did not know about him till you first got on him, and I've loved him ever since, and I still am with him. But I agree with you that Altuve people quit on Altuve, I think, for no real good reason. I mean, I know his 2020 was bad, and then
there's stealing as much, but I think but generally this is what's so hard to see, because the projections for Marte only had 20 homers in them.
Yeah,
and people were saying like Altuve didn't steal bases. The projections only had like 12, 15 stolen bases in there.
And it was he was still trickling to the top, because I think what we didn't emphasize enough, and it was talked about, I don't want to say nobody talked about it, what wasn't emphasized enough was that second base was garbage this year at the top. And then once you got past the first like 7 or 8 guys, there was a glob of like 30 of the same player. Like, you can't tell me, now he's been great this year, so it's different, but you can't tell me that Ryan McMahon should have had that different of a projection from Mike Moustakas. And I like Moustakas, but they were going 100+ picks apart. And you can't tell me that they were that
people loved them, and I mean, yeah, one's doing well and one isn't. But the point was that they were kind of they were like the last hurrahs. Like it gets even worse after that. So, but one other thing that I see that's common here, at least among sort of Marte and Altuve, and another guy that I have a lot of is Segura. And what I see is common there is that some of the hardest value to see is when a guy hits like 275 and hits like 18 homers and steals 10 bases or 8 bases.
It feels like there's nothing high impact because he doesn't have one standout category.
Yeah, like nobody wanted Segura. I got him super late in a lot of places, and he was really cool because he has that 2B, 3B, so he's like a CIMI. 4 positions.
Yeah, exactly. 4 positions plus util, of course. And that's a huge factor too.
He's on most of my cut line.
Segura was definitely somebody I was looking at. Like, people are just forgetting him.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you that I call them kitchen sink guys who do a bit of everything. And the bottom line contribution is huge at the end of the year, but nobody sees it as standout because there's not a ton of SBs. There's not a ton of power. There's not a 300 plus average. There's not 100 runs or 100 ribbies. It's just good across the board. I love those players, and they definitely are undervalued in fantasy.
You've come to a good place in NFBC. What's your favorite format? Where did you come from? Where does your favorite format now?
So I grew up playing an AL only 10-team league that my dad started at his work in 1989.
Wow.
And, I got to be around the drafts for the first few years, and I was always begging for a team. I finally got a team. I think when I was 11 or 12 when I first got a team. And, my dad was like helping me make my lists and everything, but I got to draft and do my own thing. So I grew up kind of in the depths, a 10-team AL only.
Wow,
and they use double catchers and everything,
wow.
corner and middle. Like, I remember drafting guys like Pat Mears and just the lamest backup. 2 catchers in AL only. Are you kidding me?
God.
So I started.
I hate the most about AL there.
I started in like the deep. So like getting into a player pool where I've really found that I like it. I love the 5x5, 12 to 15 team range. I think that's my wheelhouse. The one format that I don't love, I've come around on head-to-head. I used to be not so much on head-to-head. I like head-to-head points. I don't like head-to-head categories as much, where, 20 wins, or, not, you wouldn't get 20 wins, but like 6 wins for you, 4 wins for me, you win the category, you get a win. And then sometimes, if you are going to do head-to-head categories, I think each category should be a game, quote unquote. So if you beat me 6 categories to 4, then you went 6-4 for the week. I don't like when it's like you won 6 categories to 4 and you're now 1-0. I don't like that as much. So that's probably my least favorite format, but I've come around on head-to-head points. I like 10-teamers for the challenge I was talking about with like the waiver wire thing. I think it's a completely different set of challenges. But if you want my wheelhouse, it's going to be 12 to 15 standard 5x5. I still really like, I know the flaws of average. I know guys don't steal bases that much anymore. I understand that. I don't think we necessarily need to change them. It's just a different league that we have to deal with.
Yeah. I think some of my favorite formats are the super deep. I like labor overall. I like the 12-team AL only 2 catches. It's just ridiculous. It forces me to also just know the player pool all the way down to the very bottom.
Nitty-gritty. Exactly. And like you said, that's 12-team AL only.
We have 5 outfielders. We're starting 60 American League outfielders.
That is nuts. And like you said, that helped you get Badu and Garcia, because you're like, Tigers and Rangers are going to play these 2 guys. I might as well get them regardless of what their projections are. So
sometimes I forget to then like follow that player all the way up to like my 10-teamer. Like, I'll have players where like, oh, I've had Garcia in AL labor since the very beginning. I forgot to pick him up.
Maybe I should get him in my OC. Yeah. Because then he goes off the way he has too. I feel like he hits a homer every other.
But now
day
I'm like, he's still going to hit 230 going forward, right?
I mean, I really, really think so. But again, that 230 can be valuable in a lot of leagues because
powerful,
A, it's got power, and B, batting average, a 230 average is not the
not
sinkhole
as painful as it used to.
Yeah, like what's the league average right now? Like 250 or something?
Yeah. No, it's below. It's like 243.
It's below. So yeah, if you're hitting 230 with power and you're sprinkling in some steals, like I said, even if Adolis, I know I've repeated it a few times, but even if he's a 100 WRC plus the rest of the way, I bet he's a top 100 hitter, I would say. Maybe not 100 player. but
he'll get the job on that team.
Yep.
And he'll continue
why
to play.
Not? By the way, Cards are really putting some talent out into the league with the Rosarena, Voit, and now Adolis Garcia. Now they got something back for Voit and Rosarena, so I don't want to hear Cards fans cry about that. But they just discarded Garcia, and now he's the Rangers discarded Garcia. They DFA'd him when they signed Fultonevich, and they had to, and then he didn't get picked up by anybody.
On the 40-man.
Yeah, so then they put him back on the 40-man. So that shows you how nobody wanted Adolis Garcia.
Here's an interesting side point. I looked at this a while back. The Yankees, Cardinals, and Rangers produce the most major league talent.
Really?
It doesn't mean that they're
in there too. That
doesn't mean that they're on those respective teams.
But they come from their systems.
Yeah.
So that's the
that was like the 2 or 3 years ago.
You know what I wonder
might
where
be a little
Houston
different
ranks. Now. Because at a point in 19, I don't remember, I never followed through with it, but at a point in 19, I was realizing how many guys had touched the Houston system. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, Ramon Laureano was one, of course, the JD Martinez thing. I had a whole list of guys, and they weren't just all stars. They were a big range. So I wonder where they would rank if you did a rerun of that in 2021, which systems provide the most.
I can tell you who's not producing major leaguers is the
Rockies. A's. Well, yeah, no, that makes sense. No,
they trade away their guys all the time. But when was the last time you're like, oh, this was the A that was traded for?
No, they know how to get rid of the youngsters that like obviously they traded Josh Donaldson, but he was fully formed stud, and that was obviously a mess up. But when they traded,
they actually didn't even draft him.
Yeah, exactly. And
they traded for him as a minor leaguer. So
what they're more likely to do is to get the guys from those systems that you're talking about that blow up on their team. Like, oh, they got them from the Yankees. They got James Caprillion from the Yankees as an afterthought because of how hurt he got. They got Ramon Laureano from the Astros.
40-man crunch.
Exactly. So they take advantage of other teams' issues like that. They don't necessarily develop themselves, which, by the way, how do you think we're going to go with Luzardo and Puck? What do you think is sorry to divert from what we need to talk about, but since we brought up A's, are either of them going to develop into the frontliners that we have been hoping for? Do you think?
I'm a little bit disappointed with A's pitching development.
We give them like love for it because I think they find guys that are mostly formed and give them the final touch. But do they really build guys up from the bottom? Like,
and I actually don't even know how much of that they do. I think that the park actually erases some flaws. You know, like I think
that's true.
If Mike Fiers was pitching in Yankee Stadium,
no chance he'd have done what he did there. Bassett, I like what Bassett's doing. He's added some strikeouts.
Like, what if he was still a White Sox? Like,
no chance.
I don't think he would have the same career. I think he'd be in the pen by now.
Yeah.
So
he probably wouldn't have gotten to this point because all those years when he didn't strike anybody out, the White Sox would have moved him to a different role. But now he's actually a strikeout stud. So being with Oakland and having that
now he could probably be an okay White Sox. Yeah, I agree. But it would have.
But the 3 years before that, I don't. When he was striking out 7 per 9. I think they might have moved on.
But in terms of like
starter,
and in terms of like stuff plus, like none, like all their guys are bad. Like,
oh wow, really?
Cole Irvin is like a 70 stuff plus.
I'm not surprised on that.
Dalton Jeffries is like a 77.
You scared me off of him when you gave the stuff plus number on him at the beginning of the season, and I had him as like a late target type of guy, and I moved off when you said his. And stuff they
haven't like I think the fact that Caprillion moved ahead of him says something about how they think of him internally.
Yep.
Caprillion is close to 100, but one of the problems is that I think his sinker is better than his four seam, but he's using his four seam more often.
Yes.
So he has like a weird arm slot. If you think about it, none of their guys have the arm slot that everybody wants in baseball. None of them have the like top of, you know, like a sort of top 3/4. Mm-hmm. They're all kind of like out here in that. Think about Manaya. Yep. Manaya has he's like a slinger almost.
He kind of slangs it. Yep.
Caprillion is like 2/3. Luzardo is 2/3. And I think if Luzardo was over the top, he would be Urias. Like if he could have a better arm slot, he has a lot of the fundamental building blocks of Urias, right?
Yep. He really
But what did Urias do? Improved his breaking ball. We don't have to talk about exactly what mechanism because he's on the Dodgers and there's a reputation there. But he improved his breaking ball and is now his breaking ball is ahead of his changeup. And his four seamer is way better than Luzardo's by stuff plus. because it has more ride. So Urias and Luzardo, you're like, okay, if you didn't know that much about pitch movement, you just sort of watch them, you'd be like, okay, both of them are 94 to 96 from left side, yeah. You know, change up first with an okay breaking ball, you know, mid 80s breaking ball. What's the problem here? Why is one good and one bad? Well, Luzardo's arm slot is lower, and all of his stuff doesn't move the way we want it to. He doesn't have the same sort of vertical movement, and his breaking ball sometimes gets really soft and slurvy, sort of 82 when he needs, like, out the pen, he's going to be great because now his breaking ball is 88. He threw an 88-mile-an-hour curveball the other day. I was like, yeah,
he's going to get that extra velo, and he's going to be like a 2 to 3 inning stud. So he's going to have value in certain leagues. But he was drafted as a top 100 guy.
I know. I actually count him as one of my biggest mistakes this year.
I liked him, but I did back off when it was top 100. But I definitely did not see this coming, so I can't pretend that I was anywhere near seeing failure. I just thought top 100 was a little aggressive, and here we are now with a 5.06 ERA and a trip to the bullpen for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, what's weird about it is that they said he's in the bullpen, but they didn't say for a little bit.
No, they just said
he's in the bullpen
guy.
Yeah, I was like, oh crap.
Okay. Because remember last year they started him in the bullpen, and it was like three inning outings,
and they were like, kind of like, we're building.
Yeah,
but this whole idea of building.
They did not give that caveat.
There's no schedule here.
They just said he's off to the bullpen.
I mean, like 10-teamer droppable.
12-teamer, I think so too.
12-teamer droppable. 15-team. It's like that.
He's
in that sort of Christian Javier moment where, and Christian Javier is better, where you're kind of like, oh God, do I drop this guy? I can't really put him in my reliever slot because he's not going to get me saves.
Can you reserve him? But then if you're loaded on injuries,
your reserve is all injuries.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's tough. And you know, Javier lost out to Luis Garcia, which kind of shows where they stand with Luis Garcia, even though the two have been pretty close. I thought Javier would win that. I thought Garcia would get sent down.
Well, there's a little bit of a command plus situation there, maybe, where Javier might have reliever command. He's like more sort of 87, whereas Garcia is more like 95. There's something meaningful maybe about 90. I don't know, though. I also think that this might just be long-term innings massaging.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
There might be a moment where they're like, now Christian Javier is starting and Garcia's to the pen.
Yeah.
So
I
would hold on to those guys. And I think the one nice thing I can say about Javier right now is that we in the context of our earlier conversation about no zeros and bidding, having a guy like Javier or Luzardo on your 15-team bench can help you reduce your FAB bids. Because you're like, worst case scenario, I throw Javier in as my final starter
and just get some,
and maybe I get a win.
Yeah, because if they bring him in the middle, pitch 2-3 innings in the between 5th and 8th innings, that's a lot of times when the game is decided anyway. I could see stealing some W's with Javier in that role. And I agree, I would not cut him. Even in 12-teamers, I'd really be finding a way to. Now, if you get pushed up against the wall because you have all these injuries, I get it. But if you can afford to keep Javier, he should be kept. I think your point about it's his turn now and then Garcia's turn later is very smart. I think around the All-Star break, we'll probably see him get, you know how they get sent down to like A ball because it's like the closest affiliate to where they can still be working, and then they'll come back right after the All-Star. I think he'll get one of those plus a little bit of an extended break for Garcia, and Javier will fill.
And that'll be the hardest. That might be the hardest time to keep him, is when we're setting him down to stretch him out. Please be not lying to me.
Yeah, you know, like, oh God, what do you do? I remember when those first started happening.
Right?
They started happening like 4 or 5 years ago. Those demotions around the All-Star break started happening, and you'd panic.
Yeah.
I think they happened to this guy. Now, when I say this name, you're going to laugh and be like, well, this guy was never fantasy viable. But Chris Tillman did have some fantasy viability. Don't forget there was a year where, you know, he had some years.
Okay years in Baltimore.
Yeah, sub-4 ERAs for a while in an All-Star bid. But he got sent out one time, and everyone freaked out. It was in the midst of a good year. We're like, what the heck is happening? And it was just one of those, hey, we're keeping him here because he didn't make the All-Star team.
To keep innings down, or to keep him up.
It was just
on
to keep
schedule.
on schedule.
Yeah,
and everyone freaked out. And now it's more commonplace. And I bet we see something like that with Luis Garcia.
Yeah. So the other thing that I would say, and this is me being cynical a little bit, is that Jake Odorizzi signed a very incentive-laden contract that has all these markers in it for innings and starts. Oh. And listen. You're
not wrong. You don't have to say it, but you're not wrong.
I mean,
look at how often we saw it with Maeda.
If you're running a team, you could also say, hey, my best rotation does not have Jake Odorizzi in it. That could happen.
True.
You could say that. And you could say Jake Odorizzi sometimes struggles third time through the order. So by making him my 4-inning guy or my 3-inning middle of the game guy, like we might get the most value out of him.
That's true.
And so those things are true, but they would also make him a cheaper player for your team. So
yeah.
But Odorizzi got somehow backed in the corner, and that was the best deal he could get. So
I know, and that surprised me. I'm an Odorizzi fan. Obviously, he struggled a lot last year, and it made his market pretty ugly. And obviously, he hasn't really done much yet this year. I think that's a good call out. It's a lot harder to justify when you have someone like Ketel Marte with the Dodgers, when he would just be pitching his butt off, and then they're like, "You're a reliever now." It's like, wait, why? And it's like all these incentive parts of his deal that would come
Plus
through.
His velo kind of drops off at the end of the season.
They would find any, and yeah, it would, but it was always suspect when they did that. But with Odorizzi, it is going to be an easier sell, and I think that could help them make sure that they get Garcia and Javier in there.
I mean, Urquidy's already had the shoulder, so what if he gets back on? So
what if Fromber's fingers messed up? But anyway, I know we got a rundown to get to, so let's dive in.
All right. So let's see here. I've got 2 pitchers here, and the overall question is like, I'd like to hear sort of, through your answer, maybe like what kind of stats you're looking at. So when we're talking about like Luis Castillo versus Sonny Gray, the nice thing about debating these two is the park factors are the same. The schedule should probably line up to be similar for them, even though you can kind of miss a team and hit a team, but whatever. So how are you going to differentiate between Luis Castillo and Sonny Gray at this point?
Is crying an option? If so, then I'm open to that. Boy, it's really difficult right now because you look across the board on their statistical profiles, and it's hard to find anything that's too different, except for the fact that Gray has 10 points more in his strikeout rate, but nothing else underneath that really justifies that 10-point difference from 29% to 19%. They're walking the same, they're swinging strike rates dead even to like 11%, 11.2 to 11.1. It's like darn near to the percentage there. And so I wonder, you could dig in and probably see some stuff in pitchers counts where Gray's finishing guys off and Castillo isn't. Between the two, here's the thing. Early on when Castillo was struggling, I was like, hey, he's a slow starter. He's a warm weather guy. I think we've shown that there's some cold weather issue there. And I thought that he would start to turn it around as the spring morphed into summer. Well, that has not happened. And I have concerns now that run deeper than, he's going to figure it out. So between those two, I'm going to take Gray. I worry that Castillo has lost the feel for really any of his pitches at this point, but particularly that changeup, which was such a driving force of his arsenal throughout his career. It's still the best of his pitches, but that is in extreme quotes because none of his pitches are working well. And the fastball has gotten so bad that the slider and changeup can't really overcome it at this point. So I'm going to go Gray. You've taught me about how that extra pitch, 4 pitches versus 3, can be so valuable. And yeah, the changeup is like a show me type of offering for Gray. It's not a total pitch, but he's got a deeper arsenal. He's had better command of it right now. At least it seems like I'd be interested in their command plus numbers. I'm going to go Gray here over Castillo, and I'm dropping Castillo in some of the shallower leagues.
Yeah. It's an interesting answer. I tried to keep away from, my boutique black box stats from being too much of a crutch. So I like to sort of feel my way through some of those things. Command Plus actually has them about the same, which is surprising because in the past, Castillo's had really good Command Pluses. So,
yeah.
You know, there's something to me that's interesting about guys who are command first, and the stuff is a little bit just behind the command. Is that I think that some years they hit some sort of injury, and when the command plus is gone, they have no stuff plus to fall back on.
Yes, exactly.
Gray's always had slightly better stuff plus numbers, slightly better strikeout rates. He's kind of a more traditional pitcher in that he's got a great breaking ball in a league right now that loves great breaking balls. And you have to remember sometimes to be like, stuff plus, I think, and command plus are really shine when like Alek Manoah comes up, Shane McClanahan comes up, and Vladimir Gutierrez comes up. And you might joke and say, well, you could just use prospect predicate or like even just like watch the game or something. But, you know, like I think that sometimes it's not very obvious. Gutierrez had a pretty good first game. You know, there's a lot of people who said, like, what, you know, why don't we jump on him? Well, his stuff plus was terrible. So,
okay, I was going to ask, how bad was it? Because you know, he has a giant spider tattoo on his neck.
Yes,
so
that tattoo is crazy.
He's become a bit of a cult favorite in my stream. We call him Spider Neck because his MLB The Show card is just
him and Molina scare the crap out of
yeah, like it's horrifying. So when he came up, we were all pretty excited in my Twitch chat, and I analyzed the start, and I was like, this was not good. I didn't even put a dollar bid on him in any of my leagues. And I have some deep leagues where you would think he would be interesting. And I didn't get there. So I'm glad I saw in the numbers that it was worrisome. And I wanted to ask you what the stuff 69. Plus was. That's not surprising. That is not nice. You might expect us to say nice, but that is the opposite. Nice. That's very, very bad. And it was evident if you did a little under the hood look, like nothing looked great there. And even if you watched the game, he was kind of like, again, the results were good, but we watched a lot of the game and it was like, I don't see a lot here. Now he may get better because that was an ugly weather game in Chicago, like the wind howling, and it's his debut, and that stuff sort of matters. But I would not rush out to get him without seeing something drastically different than what we saw in that opener from Vladimir Gutierrez. Fun guy with the spider neck tattoo. Don't cross him, but also don't pick him up.
But like, yeah, and so like, you know, here's another stuff plus number that might surprise you because he's doing really well. Let me just load it. He's also in the news right now for some unfortunate comments by broadcaster. Marcus Stroman has a 75 stuff plus.
Whoa, he's been excellent results wise. So what is the disconnect? What's his command plus? Is he winning by command? Is he winning by key ground balls? Like what's the disconnect there? Because he's got a 2.66 ERA, 106 WHIP. So everyone's saying like he's been great, and then you bring up the stuff, and it's
right.
That's worrisome.
The location plus is sort of a location plus command plus thing. It's really above average, and so is his command plus. So I think part of it is command. He's also, and this is the hardest thing to nail down, is like right now he's throwing 5 pitches, maybe 6. I mean, he's still throwing the occasional curveball.
Yep.
So what he's almost like in that Ryu, you know, Ryu to Roark. I mean, Roark is the bottom of it, but that sort of that Gibson, Kyle
Gibson. He had to get a mention.
I had to get him in.
Had to.
He's in that group of pitchers that just have a lot of pitches that they have good command of. I would also think that, you know, looking back on his matchups, he's had primo matchups. His home park is pretty pitcher friendly compared to a lot of parks. So I find him fascinating, but I also think that there are aspects that either we haven't captured yet, like stuff plus is in its fairly in infancy. I mean, I've been studying it for a long time, but in this iteration, it's only sort of 2 years, 3 years old. So we could, and then there's deception. You know, there's deception. There's the interaction between Park, and because Park can actually change your stuff plus a little bit. So, you know, like if German Marquez's curveball doesn't move as much in Coors. Exactly. So then you can actually change his stuff plus. So there's some interactions between Park and stuff plus. There's deception, sequencing, I guess, coaching, which I hope is captured a little bit by location plus, which is saying, is this guy throwing these pitches to the right locations?
Yeah, creating your game plan and hitting your spots based on that game plan.
Right. And so maybe he's being coached really well. Maybe there's something that's deceptive about what he does. Maybe the seam shifted wake is not being captured fully. So I don't want to say that Marcus Stroman is terrible because the Stuff Plus number is terrible. I'd rather save that for a pitcher that doesn't have a track record. So exactly, it's interesting to think about Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo in this light, which is like, what can Stuff Plus tell me about a guy who has been around for a while? What I can tell you is that Luis Castillo Stuff Plus is trending upwards, but it is nowhere near where it was last year. So you could read that two ways and be like, oh yeah, with the weather he'll get there, but also he may never get to where he was last year.
True.
And so I like that you kind of worked that through with like the different pitches, and maybe he's just lost some sort of feel, or maybe he was more of a command first guy than we thought. And this year there's something wrong.
I think that might be it. Was that command drove him more? Yeah. And that's what I worry about too. I've been hearing that. I've been seeing like kind of joking tweets about Snell, Blake Snell. Like when's the IL stint coming for him to kind of, because sometimes I've heard a player say like once the season starts, everybody's got something. You could put them on the IL with something. And it might have been you who actually told me that, because obviously you interact with players and you've talked with them about how at the end of the year, they'll be like, I was dealing with this, that, and the other starting May 1st and then for the final 5 months. So I wonder if there's something there where he's just trying to play through it and it's not working with Castillo and Snell, to be honest, because they're just so drastically different than any time that we've seen them. There has to be more than just like degradation of skill. I'm just not satisfied with like, oh, they're just not that good this year. So I
pitch
wonder,
mix can actually affect Stuff Plus too, because if you have a bad pitch that you're throwing more often, some part of what's going on with Snell is that I think his changeup is no good.
It's funny because he's
loves fallen in love with it. He loves it. He talks about it.
Loves it. He listened to our podcast, mine and Nick's, and I was like, "Hey, check this out. We talked about you." He's like, "Hey, man, y'all are all wrong. My favorite pitch is my changeup. It's my best pitch." And we were like, "Oh, okay, sorry. Good to learn." It was great that he listened to it. We were happy. So I've been focused on that for years now, and it's like, maybe it shouldn't be your favorite pitch this year.
He can't command it as well as his other pitches. It leads to more walks.
The batters know. They're spinning on it. I think they just
go to lay off it. Yeah. Yep. So I think he should throw the changeup less. So that changes the Stuff Plus number. I have hopefully I have this sort of console for Stuff Plus that people see cards from on Twitter that I'm hoping to kind of release at some point. But there has been some degradation of it in his four seam fastball with Stuff Plus. So, the breaking balls still look pretty good by Stuff Plus, but the fastball has kind of seen some degradation. So, maybe something's going on there. I still think of Blake Snell as a buy low. Overall, Stuff Plus 109. Even as it's fallen off a little bit recently, he's still above average there. I think he could reduce his changeup usage, increase his breaking ball usage, and have a good stretch. So, and then with Sonny Gray, I think, some of the oldest school stats that we look at, strikeouts minus walks, they speak kindly of him,
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's something to keep an eye on too. Sometimes just there's no underlying degradation of stuff. And there's like, okay, he's given up maybe a couple homers that he won't in the future. But I think that's a good outline there to go ahead and go buy Snell. But would you do the same on Castillo?
I've been having a harder time with him, and what I'm realizing now, I should have just ranked Sonny Gray. I might have ranked Sonny Gray ahead of him, but I kept dropping him. But there's some point where like you drop him to a point where you wouldn't actually buy low on him. Like I dropped him to like top 40, like back end top 40. But I think that would actually say don't buy low, because when you buy low, the person selling is probably saying like, I'm selling an SP1 or SP2. So maybe like you can buy him for like SP2 pricing, but I'm actually saying he's the 3 or 4, right?
Yeah.
So I'd only buy him as like maybe an SP5 pricing, because I might only be getting SP3 or 4 going forward, and I want to
you got to get a discount.
I got to get a discount. Yep. Who's going to sell Luis Castillo at an SP5?
That's the problem. And we've talked about this in the fantasy industry at large. Hate when people just say go out and buy low and they don't give any idea of what that looks like or how that will happen. Because again, people aren't just looking to sell top assets that they paid second, third round prices for guys that you picked up off the waiver wire or some poo-poo platter of 6 players. Right, and so the discussion needs to be there. And I think you're highlighting why it's easier said than done to just go buy low.
But then it's also really hard without knowing your league settings. And then sometimes your league has been together for years. Like, you know, oh, John doesn't trade pitching or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, exactly.
And then people are like, oh, who could I trade Luis Castillo for? And I'm like, just generally, just like all of the players in the world. Who can you trade it for?
It's so hard when they ask that question. I said, I don't know. What would you
please give me some names? And the best thing that someone can do in a chat format is to actually go and do some of the work and go and look. And this team needs pitching or hitting, and they have Luis Castillo, or this team needs pitching, and find some needs on other teams, find some available players, and then come back and be like, I could trade Luis Castillo for Brandon Lau,
boom, boom,
or
boom,
Mike Moustakas, or this guy who would fit my needs, and I think I could get him. What do you think? Then it's way easier for me to be like, oh yeah, Moose should get hot, you know, that one. So anyway, do a little bit.
I totally agree with that, because if you just say, who am I getting for so-and-so? I don't know. Whoever your league will give you. No, I totally agree. Exactly. You got to do some legwork there, and make sure too, another big flaw when trading is like, make sure your team that you're trading with could use a pitcher on a buy low scenario. Like if they've got Cole and Bauer as their top 2, they don't need pitching. So it doesn't matter that you want, it doesn't matter that you want player X. I think sometimes too many fantasy players are too selfish in what they look for because they just want a certain player, there's some research on this that you do better in negotiations if you can put yourself in their shoes and examine their needs and like just try to say, would I take this deal if I was there? Yeah, be honest with yourself. You wouldn't take the crap that you're offering, so don't offer it to somebody else. You know, it's like, come on, you're trying to get over. I used to be the guy, and I'll freely admit this, and I now roast this person, but I used to be the guy who would write you like a dissertation on why you should take the trade, because I'll give you this whole detail about how great my guys are. And one time, this guy in my league, if they're so great, why are you trading them? His name is Josh, and he listens to a lot of pods, so he might listen to this. He basically goes, well, then why are you trading him, man? I'm like, you know what? You're right. That's fair. And from that day forward, I was like, stop selling your players like that. If I communicate with somebody beyond the trade offer itself, it's usually about, I could see this person starting for you here. Yeah. And you have a surplus here. If I'm misreading that and you see something else, then just tell me. Then like, by all means, that guy wouldn't start for my team. Okay, then you don't see that. Then I'll try to either go higher here or lower here or do something else. Yeah, but don't tell them how great the players are, because then they're just going to say the evaluation is what we're in this for. We're all trying to evaluate these players. So you have your opinion of how good these players are. I need to know how they fit your team, and if they actually would start for if they fit your needs. But so a lot of this discussion also gets harder to me around the fringes where you could just drop the guy. So a lot of times the question of buy low or sell high is less meaningful. Maybe your league doesn't have trades. There's a lot of leagues like that. And all then, of NFBC. And then, or maybe maybe it doesn't matter what you think of what I think of Luis Castillo. There's just no market for him. You know, like I've been trying to sell him and no one's buying. So, you know, your buy low, sell high doesn't matter to me. The market has spoken, you know? Yeah. And I don't think Luis Castillo is a drop yet. I think it's harder for these next 2 names where, you know, and I might've been wrong on one of these, Jameson, Taillon, and Eduardo Rodriguez. I might've been wrong on both of these guys. But you know, are they droppers for you at this point? I was right there with you with Taillon. And then I saw this tweet from this guy, Anas Cerise. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. And he was responding to somebody else's tweet, Alex Rinaldi's, that was highlighting some big trouble with Jameson Taillon. And this was one where like the stats backed up what I was kind of seeing. Cause I was big. You mentioned that you might've been wrong on one of these guys. I imagine it was Taillon. Are you saying that you might, cause I was huge on Taillon going. I think I might've been wrong on both these guys. I ranked them fairly aggressively. I
I might still double down on one. So I'm letting you ramble first.
Okay, well, I'm not. If it's Eduardo, then I'll be listening because you can sell me, because I'm not a huge Eduardo guy. I kind of think he is what he is, which is not a 5.64 ERA, by the way. I think he'll get back into his high threes. But Taillon, I thought he was going to be a G. I'm like, he brought that slider on the last time that we saw him. I think he's healthy. He missed enough time to where he can come back fully, but he's been so inconsistent. And then the tweet set from you and Alex highlighting where his stuff has been going and the issues with his curveball are very concerning. And that's something right now where I'm like, oh no, this is very scary from him. And if I was going to drop one of these two, if I was forced into a situation where I had to drop one, even though Taillon's been better, I think he's the drop, because if this stuff, obviously this stuff could change with his stuff. Sorry, to keep using that word, but you guys highlighted how the stuff plus was dropping, and Alex highlighted
the fastball velo is okay, but
but the breaking ball velo was what Alex was zooming in on too. And if those things don't change, he's going to continue to struggle this year and really be kind of an up and down sort of guy. And my biggest concern with him is that home run rate, which is at 1.9 and does not come with an accompanying gaudy homer to fly ball rate. It's 16%, which is
a tough park.
Yeah, and he's a 13% career guy. And two of his away parks can be difficult too, with Toronto, regardless of where they're playing, whether it's Dunedin, Buffalo, or Toronto. They're all hitters' parks. And then Camden in the summer is hell on pitchers who allow homers. So I'm worried that that's not going to come down and that it's going to be a problem for him all year. So I look at a 373 Sierra and I see that it's good, and somebody will probably pick him up if I drop him. But if I have to drop somebody in a shallower league right now, unfortunately, it's Taillon. Even though I loved him coming into the year, I was concerned going in, and then literally seeing y'all's tweets today, I'm like, well, that kind of marries with what I was seeing with the eye test. Now here's the numbers test to back it up. This is scary.
Yeah. The eye testers have been getting on me for Taillon for I think the late home run issues. I mean, I've watched a fair amount of starts. I think the late home run, the late sort of blow up inning, a little bit of problem getting through the third time through the order. I don't think that he should have that problem necessarily, because he still has the show me change. He still has the two breaking balls, the fastball. He's even working the sinker back in. So there is a potential here for, you know, maybe two of the pitches being show me, but like 5-pitch mix. I don't think he's like a 2-pitch guy, even if the slider is the best secondary. Yeah. And so I still see potential there. I think I also maybe underrated. Yankee Stadium is so bad. Such a tough park that, like, I mean, just imagine Severino and Herman and Cole as Pirates.
Oh my gosh, it would be unreal.
We'd all be writing fluff pieces about how they've got the best rotation of all time or whatever.
Yep.
So I think that Yankee Stadium is just a really tough park. It maybe not be all the way to Coors, but it is very similar to like a Cincinnati.
Yes, and they don't get, like, we talk about it. We know that it's a hitter's park, but I don't think we express enough how difficult it can be on pitchers, and how somebody like Taillon might be a sit at home right now, not necessarily a cut, but maybe you only start him in road matchups or friendly home matchups, as opposed to just start all the time, which is what I was doing with him at the start of the year.
And that's actually a big differentiator for me between these two guys, because Eduardo Rodriguez was always a guy whose command plus was his best feature. And even this year, 112 command plus, and 83 overall, 84 overall stuff plus, right? But the one thing that I like about, I think both these guys would kind of be closer to bench right now than to in my lineup. The one thing that I like about having Taillon on my bench is that I have something to look for.
Yes, you know exactly what we're trying to analyze.
I'm looking at the breaking balls and waiting for harder stuff from the breaking balls. That's what I'd be looking for right now. With Eduardo Rodriguez, it's just not obvious to me what is missing or what he could do better. He's throwing all 4 of his pitches. They're all mediocre.
Yeah, they're all fine, but like
they're all mediocre. He still has the command that he normally has, and so maybe it's just that he's not that good. Like, he's closer to Rourke than to Ryu.
I totally agree. Like, and that's kind of where I've been with him, and he has performed well throughout his career to kind of beat where I am with him as far as my projection on Eduardo versus his projection. But maybe this is the year where he's like a 4.30 ERA at season's end. Now, that's still a run off of the ERA that he has right now, a run 1.3 runs. But are you starting a 430 guy in 10s and 12s and even 15s? Are you necessary? Because he always has a big whip too. One of the things is that his sub 4 ERA allows you to take on the higher whip. So I think that there is some great concern with Eduardo Rodriguez that he just doesn't come back this year to being the guy that we've seen in previous years.
Yeah, there's some drop off in the swinging strike rate. The 20% K minus BB, good Sierra and xFIP. Those speak well of him. But league average X K minus BB right now is like close to 16%. So it's kind of close to average. And then his ballpark factors in some ways are just as bad as Taillon's, because he's got the same problems away from home. And then even at home, even though it's not about homers necessarily in Fenway,
hits though.
Hits. And
yeah,
so
the hits just
you look at his
up.
whip and you're like, oh yeah, he's probably going to have kind of a high BABIP at home. So I could see dropping both these guys, honestly, and I'll take the L's on them. I would be a little bit closer to holding Taillon, just because I could be like, okay, they're both on my bench. I want to watch and see if the breaking balls start matching the fastballs and velocity where he's hurt.
Yeah, I don't want to cut him, but if I had to cut one, if I had both, I think I would cut Taillon right now. But like you said, actually maybe not. Like what you said about having one thing to look for, maybe reverses that. Cut Eduardo, keep Taillon on your bench, and then when you see that curveball velo get back on track, put him in. Because
they might honestly both be cuts, right?
Yeah, they really are.
They're very close.
They're big names, so you can at least put them out on the trade block, but you're not getting anything back. So if you just want something besides cutting them, you can do that kind of trade. But otherwise, do not expect a whole lot from them in the short term, especially because they need to fix things. Taillon, we know what he needs to fix. Eduardo, it's more of a nebulous. We don't really know because everything's kind of meh.
Yeah, I guess fewer BABIP, you could really focus on BABIP for him. But I think Zips gives him like a 323 BABIP going forward, and they might be right because that's a Fenway. There's probably a Fenway effect there.
Has to be for sure.
Well, that is going to wrap things up here for Rates and Barrels, and Sleeper and the Bust converging to be one.
Love it.
And thanks so much to Paul Sporer for coming on. It was a pleasure. And you can follow Sporer at Sporer, SPORER, on Twitter. And what's your Twitch handle?
Same, twitch.tv/Sporer. So you can follow me there on both. Great talking with you. We may have a chance to see each other before Fall League, though. Girlfriend and I are talking about going out to California, running into you and Mason. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Sweet. Go attend a game or something. That'd
exactly.
Be fun.
That'd be wonderful. So thank you so much for having me on, man. It was great talking with you.
And you can follow us at you can follow me at ENOSARRIS. You cannot follow Derek Van Riper into vacation like we all would like to. And we'll be back on Friday. We've got a special guest on Friday, Andrew Perpetua, former analyst for the New York Mets, and we'll be talking about the future and past of baseball analysis. So that he's a crazy guy. So we'll probably talk about some weird stuff you'd never thought of before. And thanks again to Sporer, and thanks to everyone. And thanks for listening.